All right, well, let's get going. I think today, guys, we're wanted to talk a little bit about clauses. And along with clauses, we're going to get into a couple of forms based on some of the questions I had this last week regarding forms and regarding things like fee agreements, late material defects, no disclosure forms. When had all of that going on this week with different questions on it. As far as the clauses go, we're going to cover a little bit about that and maybe some of the main clauses that come up and how to use them, when to use them, that kind of thing. But before we start, I thought we'd just kind of go with the little board 2-minute video there on the market, and always a good way to start a sales meeting, kind of keep yourself up to date with those kind of things. So we'll start with that. If you can't hear, let me know. I think we're here. Go big.
Metro Vancouver home sales saw
You guys hear that okay?
recovery in June, with sales registered on the MLS down 10% year over year, half the decline we saw in May. Let's take a closer look. June sales totaled just under 2,200. That's down 10% compared to June 2024 and 26% below the 10-year seasonal average. On the supply side, sellers listed 6,300 homes on the MLS, a 10% increase compared to June 2024 and 13% above the seasonal average. June ended with over 17,000 listings on the market, which is 44% above the seasonal average for the month. As home sales regain their footing, inventory levels aren't building as quickly as we've seen lately. If this momentum continues, we may soon see a shift towards a market with greater buyer demand. We can measure buyer demand using the sales to active listings ratio. This ratio measures the homes available for sale against the number of homes sold throughout the month to get an idea of supply and demand. Analysis of historical data suggests downward pressure on home prices occurs when this ratio dips below 12% for a sustained period. Home prices often experience upward pressure when it surpasses 20% over several months. The market overall stands in balanced conditions. June ended with this ratio at 13% for all homes. By property type, the ratio is 10% for detached homes, 17% for attached, and 14% for apartments. Looking at prices, the MLS HPI benchmark price for all housing types sits at $1,173,000. This is a 3% decrease from this time last year. By property type, the benchmark price of detached homes is $1,995,000, townhomes $1,104,000, and apartments $748,000. So what's next for the Metro Vancouver housing market? Most market segments remain in balanced market conditions, which has generally kept prices trending sideways since the start of the year. Couple that with a sizable inventory and mortgage rates down around 2% since last summer. Buyers are enjoying some of the most favorable conditions seen in years. For further housing market information, go to the Market Watch section of our website.
There you go. So that's a nice little, let me just make sure this is off. It'll go bananas on me again. Stop.
Why is Amazon paying me $600
No.
a day? Because I use Amazon.
We don't care about Amazon. Okay, so a little bit about the market there. It seems to be kind of balancing itself out a little bit. The listings are kind of moderating a little bit, coming into a little bit more reasonable line with the 10-year average. So I think what they're saying about maybe moving towards a buyer's market, we might have kind of bottomed out here, and I got my fingers crossed here that we are, because we all want to get moving on this thing and get through this and move forward. So hopefully what what the forecast is, that it holds and the market continues on going forward, which means that keep working hard, and it's going to pay off for you guys. Keep sending your doing your marketing programs, whatever it is, whether it's social marketing or emails or walking or door knocking or whatever. I was just talking to Gavin there, and he said that had an open house and the only 2 people by were other owners. So I mean, not a good sign, but hey, it is a good sign, because that means that, there's a potential down the road of, having another listing going forward. So they're obviously interested in what's going on and seeing what's out there. And, as long as he keeps in touch with those folks and, keeps them abreast of what's going on and, definitely go knock on their door when that one sells. He might have another listing in his pocket right away. So, continue your marketing, guys. Always, always be selling what's that ABC, always be closing kind of thing. So think about that and don't lose faith. Even though all the gloom and doom in the news and all that other stuff and the tariffs and all this stuff, just keep moving forward and keep doing your thing, and it'll pay off eventually. No, not to worry. So that being said, let's talk a little bit about clauses, and just to start off with. There's two places really that I go for my clauses, and that's one is the Paragon and web forms, and the other one I just type in my search, and it's called clauses BCFSA. So let me just share my screen with you a little bit here. We'll kind of roll down these. So share. So here are the clauses these are the clauses in web forms, and I just go down the left-hand side to the menu and hit the clauses, and they got BCREA clauses, British Columbia Financial Services Authority clauses, Schedule A. They even have some samples of Schedule A. So these are more or less, you can search on these. I just got to get my thing together. Probably the easier one to kind of read sometimes is this one here. All I do is put BCFSA clauses, and it comes up with this page here. And these are the questions I get a lot. Adding an additional name to the buyer. So that one in particular would be in a situation where you have a couple of people buy it with mom and dad backing them up on that, and I think Ting can relate to this. She's a mortgage broker, and quite often they go to the bank and they try and get the financing themselves, and then they say, no, we need a co-signer. And that would be, this clause here, adding an additional name to the contract. Now, what you ought to be doing on those kind of things there is when you're having your initial meeting with your client, ask them if they're going to need a co-signer, if there's anybody else that needs to be on this contract. And it's probably best to have this clause in there initially when you actually, write the initial contract. And, notwithstanding 20A, 20A and B, if you recall back in the contract, 20A is where they need the seller's authorization to assign the contract or add a name to it. And 20B is where if there's any profit to be made, that the profit goes back to the original seller. And most people will, and that's 20A and B, and the buyer without further consent of the seller add, and they want, what they would like in there is to add the person's name. So Mom and Pop Smith or whatever their name is. So if you have the name, insert the name there when you're doing the contract. Back in the old days, we used to have whoever could go in there, and that's not specific enough. So they prefer to have a name. So if you know that their parents may need to go on the contract, now's the time to put it in there and put, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, whatever their name is, or a specific person. As an additional buyer prior to completion, and the seller agrees to sign completion documents as are necessary to reflect the addition. The seller consent does not release the buyer from liability under this contract. Well, you'll notice on this thing here, it says 28. So in that case there, you cross out 28 of the contract, but you leave 20B on that. And 20B is the part where if there's any profit to be made, that it goes back to the seller. And it's really quite important as a selling agent to make sure that only 20A is crossed out and not 20A and 20B is crossed out. Don't cross out all of 20. And there's a reason for that, because if 20A and 20B are crossed out, that means if the guy flips the deal, they could make a profit on it, and your seller has no recourse on that. And that was more prevalent back in the day, where somebody would buy a property and have a longer closing, maybe a 3-month closing or 6-month closing, and they'd flip the property. And back in the really hot days, when it was, probably the 2010 and that area, and they're flipping it 2 or 3 times before it closed. And that's where a lot of these regulations came into effect. But my biggest fear was always to be the guy on the wrong end of that one, where I was a listing realtor. And I hesitated to, I let them cross out, or I haven't done it. But if I were to cross out B and I sold it, say, for 900,000 to them, they turn around and sell it for $1 million. And then somebody else later on sells it for $1.1 million, your client's gonna look at you and wonder what kind of a realtor have I got? Why didn't you go out there and sell it for, $1.1 million, $1.2 million, whatever it was? Now, when it's actually a developer that you're selling to, and your client knows that it's a developer, and the developer reserves the right to assign it to somebody else, and there's a disclosure of assignment form. And when you submit this and you go over the assignment of contract form with your disclosure of assignment with your seller, and it's a developer, you can have that discussion that these guys are in it for the money. They're here to make money, and if they find another buyer, maybe they can get a group of properties together and do a land assembly and sell it for more than you bought it for. Are you okay with that? And that's what the disclosure of assignment is. It's for you to have that conversation with your client as to what can happen here, what's going on. If they say, look, Doug, it's a rundown property, we don't want to put anything more into it. It's been a rental for us, we're fine. We got enough out of it, we're good with that. We'll sign off on that and we're good to go. If it's a developer buying it, we understand what the business is. But for the regular mom and pop deals, don't ever cross out the B. And if they do assign it for, if they do assign it for a higher amount, then that money goes back to the original seller, and that covers you and your client. So be careful about that one. But this one, in this case here, it's just for adding an additional name. So if you can, when you have your initial meeting with your client, ask them if they're going to need a co-signer. If they are, try and find out who the co-signer is and insert this one here. And BCFSA recommends that we always include the disclosure of assignment form with that. So, and if the buyer's agent doesn't include it, then the seller's agent is obligated to go over it with their client. But what it does is it precipitates that conversation with your client. So that's one of the ones, adding additional name or assignment. Then there's a full assignment. We talked about that with a developer and so on and so forth, and those are a little bit different. And you have to be a little more astute to that, and your seller should know about that too. So you can go into BCFSA and find out a little bit about that. Backup offer is a good one to have too. Sometimes, not lately though, we're not too many backups, but oftentimes you will get a backup. And this is just you add this clause for the benefit of the seller, really, and for you. You don't want to get caught up where your seller's obligated to both offers. So even as a buyer's agent, you don't want to get into that mess. So this clause would help you going forward on that one there. So this one says, subject to the seller ceasing to be obligated in any way under the contract of purchase and sale, dated such and such, respecting the property, including the seller obtaining a full release from the buyer on or before the date. This condition is the sole benefit of the seller. And so this is for the seller, but you can put it in as a buyer if you're in the backup position. So it clarifies where you're at in this whole thing, both to the seller, both to your buyer, and that, we got to make sure that he's clear of this obligation to this current offer before that. Now, if you back out of an offer early, people often ask about a release form. Well, for a release for a contract, you can do an addendum. And just in the addendum, if your client, your buyer client, is not going to be removing subject to know that, it's business courtesy to release it as soon as possible, and let the selling agent market it a little longer or whatever. You don't want to tie up the property when you know your guy is going to buy. That's not really, you get a bad reputation to start doing things like that. So if you want to be a good realtor and respect your fellow realtors and give them every opportunity to, if you know for a fact that your client isn't going to remove their subjects and they have it until next Friday, and you know now that they're not, as long as we got the rescission period in there that kind of complicates things, but I'm not going to get into that right now. So what you ought to do is just do an addendum to the contract. And say, the buyer is, not gonna be removing subjects and hereby releases the seller of any and all obligations to this contract. That constitutes a release of that current offer that they have on the table. So that's why sometimes, listing realtors will ask for that. It's a courtesy thing. Technically, if they let the time go by and the time expires on their subjects and they don't remove them, the contract's dead anyway. You don't need the release. But if you're gonna release early, and sometimes it's nice just to have that release anyway. Just to know that, it just ties up all the loose ends and you got everything in order. So it just makes it a little easier. So if you're a selling agent, you might ask, hey, if you guys aren't gonna move something, let me know early. I've got a backup offer going on. I would like to deal with that. So that's kind of what you might want to put the backup offer clause in there when you're making your backup offer. And I always put backup offer right at the top in the subjects. So it's very clear that I'm not the number one offer. Now, when you're dealing with these, you got to be, the other one is the clause that's, I'll go down to it here. I'm not going to cover every one of these, so we don't have the time for that. I'm going to go into time clause, and I might jump around a little bit here. So let me see if I can find the time clause. These are all the disclosure ones: estate clause, financing. The Fish Protection Act. We all use that all the time, I'm sure. I don't even know what that is. I've never even read it. So something about that. GST is included in them all now. Heritage Homeowner Protection Act, inspection, insurance, lawyer advice, leaseholds, miscellaneous, new construction, sewage occupant permits, sewage, strata. Well, I can't find it, so let me look for it. So I need to go here. It's gonna go here. I want a time clause. Uh-oh. Too many results, clauses, time clause. Is this it here? There we go. So that's the way to search. You can go into, if you go into clauses as well here, I think I can do that here too. I'm back into web forms. I'll just type time in there. Seller invoking the time clause. So same thing, that's really tiny. Let's go back to the BCFSA one. The seller may at any time upon receipt of another accepted offer for the property, deliver written notice to the buyer or to the buyer's agent, requiring the buyer to waive or satisfy all conditions in this contract within a number of hours of the delivery of the written notice, not to include Sundays and statutory holidays. If the buyer fails to waive or satisfy all of the conditions before expiry of the notice period, this contract will terminate and the deposit will be returnable in accordance with BCFSA rules. Well, normally regarding your deposit, don't pay your deposit until after subject removal, if possible. And the reason for that is if your client does give you a deposit, you have to give it to us. If you give it to us, we have to put it in the trust account. Once it goes in the trust account, I need both signatures to release. That's the buyer and the seller. And if the buyer and the seller aren't agreeing on things, the seller doesn't want to sign it, they can hang up your client's, the buyer client's deposit. So careful about that one. I'm not going to go there with this. So, but let's just talk about the seller invoking the time clause. Usually it's a 24, 48, or 72 hours. So that's 1, 2, or 3 days time clause in that. So they have, for example, if you've got a 24-hour clause, and the seller gets another really good offer that they like, they can give notice to the buyer, the current offer, that they do have another offer and they've accepted it. And they don't have to accept that offer, by the way, so you can kind of manipulate that a little bit. If it's not accepted, you maybe don't have to give it, but once you accept that other offer, and then they got 24 hours or 48 hours to remove their final subject. and they're maybe subject to the sale of their current house. That's usually the one that's kind of hanging things up. So, I call this clause, the shit or get off the pot clause. And it's kind of funny because it's either, okay, buy it or we're going somewhere else, and that's the thing. So, now the buyer, goes into their ballpark. They have the right to still buy the property, but they got to remove their subject to sale property, on the property, which is gonna force them to make that decision. Now, some people may have the wherewithal to carry two mortgages. If they've talked to their bank and they're good clients, sometimes the bank will carry them on those two for a certain period of time or whatever they can do. But they have an option to either, walk away or remove the subject. So when you're coming in with a subject to sale, usually you'll include this clause in your offer right away, initially, and this is for the benefit of the seller, not the buyer. So, but because we're putting a subject to sale in there, it's a very, subject to sale is a very, hard sell, if you will, to the seller, because it ties up the property somewhat. And sellers don't like it. In this type of a market, they're probably gonna be okay with it. But in a buyer's market or seller's market, there's no way they're gonna accept it. They'll have three offers on the table. If you've got subject to sale, you're probably gonna go to the bottom of the pile for sure. So that's the thing there, but this, clause helps alleviate your subject to sale, because they can get out at any time. If they don't have an offer on the table, they can accept your offer, continue to market the property. If they find another buyer that wants to buy it at that price or a better price, they can give you the notice. So that's when to use that one there. Subject to sale. The other one is subject to sale. I'm just gonna type in here, sale, subject to sale. Let's go to that one. See if that one pops up. I just want the clause. I don't want all the other stuff. Oh God, I got every law and every thing that went to, I'm just gonna go back to this one here. Put subject to sale on our web forms. Nothing coming up. So I'll just put sale in there. So you gotta use different words, keywords. I always had a problem with mortgages. Underlying mortgage, backup offer, leases, cleaning. Oh, I like the cleaning one. Well, that's my own. By the way, when you're looking over here on the left-hand side, if you see the little world thing, the little global thing, that means it's one of the clauses that are given by the system. One of these little with a little head in it, those are my own clauses. So sometimes you need to make up your own clauses. I hate it as a managing broker. You guys always call me and say, what about this? What about that? And the really big problem with making up your own clauses is they could have unintentional consequences to the contract if they're not written properly. So last but not least, we'll talk about making up your own clauses, which I hate, but inevitably in this world we need to do it. But as a managing broker, the liability kind of rests on my shoulders, and if there's one word that's wrong or misinterpreted, it could cause problems with the contract, and I don't want to be in that liability situation. Neither do you, and neither does your client. So our job is to keep our client out of any problems. And 99.9% of the time, there's no problem. But the problem would occur when one or the other parties wanted to get out of the contract, and the lawyer will go through your contract and look through it with a fine-tooth comb. If there's something wrong with it, they may be able to use that to leverage themselves out of the contract. So that's that whole idea there. Still looking for subject to sale. Sale of buyer's property. Subject to the buyer entering into a contract to sell the buyer's property at the address, and the contract becoming unconditional on or before the condition for the sole benefit of the buyer. This is gonna stop sharing here for a sec. Who's done one of those? Steve, have you done any of those? Subject to the sale? Steve there? I think Steve went for coffee. Hey, Paul, how are you, buddy? How was France? Or no, you're in Italy. Rhiannon, you want to help me out here? Have you done one of those subject to sale?
Done a number of subject to sales
You
and
kind of just run us through that kind of scenario, what to watch out for and when, what I want to get at is the timing. So that if you have an offer in and then you got a backup offer and then something comes in, you know, when do you release, how far along on the new offer do you have to be and what does the new offer have to say before you give notice to the second guy, the backup offer?
yeah, well, so if I'm the selling agent, the listing agent, then if we're getting a backup offer, or sorry, if I'm the selling agent, we're getting a subject to sale offer, then I always want to make sure that we're not doing a 72-hour clause, 48 hours at the max, right? Because I do not want to be any longer drawn out than we need to be. Sometimes I'm a little bit of a biatch and we tighten it up to 36 hours, just to make sure that we're, keeping on track. That's probably the number one thing with one of those. The other thing that I want to know is the property on the market? If it isn't, I need something in the actual contract that states that the property will be on the market by such and such a date. I also want to know what price they're listing at, right? So, because all of that makes a huge difference to us moving forward. Preferably the property's on the market, we can do a search for it and, take a look at what we're working with. Because otherwise, yeah, we could be beholden to something that we don't really want to be beholden to, right? We want them to sell their property ASAP and move this whole thing along is the whole thing. So
All right, and what about, when do you actually give that notice, the 48-hour notice? How far along on your new offer should you be?
on the new offer,
Yeah,
oh, we need to have negotiated out properly.
yeah, or what about the subjects and all that? What if you got a subject offer?
Well, it is a subject offer because it's a subject to sale. So you will always have a subject in there.
No, on the new offer though.
Yeah, so they've got so for that stuff, if it is simple, then it'll be as soon as subjects are removed.
Well, okay, I think the point I'm getting at, maybe just let me go forward.
Yeah.
If you have a full subject offer coming in, and you accept it, the thing is that if you give the other guys notice that they gotta remove or not, and you got a full subject offer in,
Mhm.
they may never remove their subjects on it.
Correct. Yeah.
They may not make it through, so you may wanna have that progress along to almost a subject free offer.
Yeah.
So until that's subject free, you're not gonna give the notice to the other people.
Yeah,
So,
you'd need to have the bulk of everything complete before wanting to pull that trigger. So
and that's
definitely
what I'm getting at, yeah.
financing.
You
If
wanna
there's-
make sure that the
Yeah.
other offer is far enough along that they're not gonna crash it, and you're not giving, then you end up with nothing.
Yeah, especially on the financing side, right? That's the most.
Yeah. You get Paul to give us a letter saying they're approved. And that one there, so you wanna do as much due diligence as you can going forward on that one, yeah. So that's a little bit about some of those subjects. I wanted to talk also about, let's see here, subject to sell, time clause. Well, the cleaning clause, oh, that one's an awful one. You may wanna always put a cleaning clause in your contract. Guys, I don't know how many times I've had a realtor call me totally upset because they go to move into a place and the place is a mess. And I've even had this with developers and these, where the guy says, oh, the guy's tearing it down, I'm not gonna remove all the lumber out from the side of my house or whatever, and they move out, they don't care. And even though that clause is in there, there's really not much recourse we have other than, the seller or, the buyer to sue the seller. And in one case, we had the seller, the buyer's lawyer just send a demand letter. And oftentimes I'll ask you guys for that. The demand letter is just a letter written by the lawyer saying that, look, if you don't do whatever you're supposed to do, we're going to sue you. And it helps in some cases, but it doesn't have any weight really, other than, aesthetically. So, Rand, I'm sure you have horror stories on that one. You want to tell us one or two?
Yeah, no, I always make sure now that more importantly than even putting that in the contract is that you prepare the clients that the property may not be to the standards that we've requested. Even though in all of my contracts we say that it has to be cleaned by a professional cleaning company that is bonded very specifically. We say bonded in ours so that it has to be, and that they seller has to provide us with a receipt for the work. So if there is an issue, we can go after the actual company that did the work rather than having to fight with the actual seller.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to be careful on that one. That one's kind of fraught with issues, and I think, like Rhiannon said, prepare your client for what their idea of clean is and what somebody else's idea of clean is. It's never really the same.
And the funny thing about that is most buyers, their house is filthy dirty anyways, and then they're expecting an absolute, glory. Everything's been scrubbed with a toothbrush clean on their new purchase. It's
Yeah,
pretty.
brand new and painted and all this other stuff, and there's all that stuff about stickers on the wall and the kids' room and all that. And I don't know how many times I've been through that. So we're very careful about that going forward. Make sure that you have that. The another clause they have is access. Access between the time of subject removal and the time of closing. And your client very often will want to get in there and they want to measure for carpets. They want to maybe have an estimator come in and for the painting or for the cabinets or whatever. And you have to be very specific about what's going on there. Times, 2 hours, 3 hours with 24-hour notice or whatever it is. And the more specific you can be, and I'm going to talk about this a little later on when we're doing custom clauses, the better off you are. And let me tell you guys, our average income on some of these deals is probably between $10,000 and $50,000. I mean, I deal with some of the top realtors in our office. Their checks are pretty darn good, and it's a lot of money. And I'm talking, 60, 70, $80,000 for one deal. And these are the $5 and $10 million houses. So, but the bottom line is that you always got to ask yourself, who are you working for and whose best interest you're working. And in all cases, you're working for your client. It's not your best interest. And what your job is to get the deal across the finish line. And what that means is that whenever you have these services coming in on behalf of your client, that you ought to be there. You ought to be there to, for the inspector. You ought to be there, for if somebody has to open the door for the appraiser, you got to be there and open the door. You got to pick up the keys. You got to get out there. You got to be there. You got to lock the door at the end. Because anytime that door is open, anytime your client or a representative of your client has those keys, we're liable for that property. It's like our own property. So don't rely or don't assume that the listing realtor is going to do it for you. That's the biggest mistake people make. You've got to do your due diligence here, guys, and you got to show up for these inspections and you got to show up for that. And unless you specifically talk to the other realtor, and a lot of times it's fine. I'll call up Rhiannon and say, Rhiannon, geez, I'm so busy here, my kids are doing whatever, they got a graduation, I can't make it. And that's the only time my client can go. Is there any way you can, kind of open the door for them? Would you mind? And if she says yes, that's fine, wonderful. But if she says, geez, Doug, I'm sorry, I'm busy too that night, I'm gonna have to call Gavin. Gavin, can you help me out here, buddy? Can you go and do this for me and get somebody else from our office, another realtor, to go and open it for you and arrange that? But whether it's Gavin or I, remember, you guys are the designated agents of Century 21. Century 21 is usually the contract, and you're the designated agent. So whether it's Gavin or Elma or Amir going on my behalf, that's acceptable. And I would call Rhiannon and say, Rhiannon, I can't make it, but I can have Gavin go. Are you okay with that? So another guy in our office, he's a licensed realtor, and she's 99.99 going to say, no, don't worry about it. So don't depend on the, don't put in the contract that they have access and then expect the listing realtor to go and open the door for them. All right, we're still liable and responsible for that, and I want to make that perfectly clear because we've had a couple of issues about that. And not so much rules, the rules of cooperation with the board or BCFSA. It's the public, the seller that is upset because there's nobody there, to open the door, or whatever, or supervise them. There's no representative from the real estate, industry there, and that's not right. So, it's also public perception and everything else there. Make sure that you've arranged to be there on your client's behalf, and I don't care if you're going on holidays or you've got this or that, something else. You're getting $20,000-$30,000 on these deals, show up. So that's all I want to say on that one. We're not so much now. We're kind of moving out of this. But it's the oil tank clause. And oftentimes, or not oftentimes, but if you look at these properties, I guess back in the 1950s, all of Burnaby was probably on oil tanks, most of Burnaby anyway, and a lot of, Vancouver, East Vancouver, whatever, I don't know. That was before they had the pipelines in there, and natural gas and so on and so forth. And they had to go in there and fill these tanks up with oil, and the tank would have a little spigot into the furnace room, and that's the way they heated it. And every so often a truck would go around and fill them all up, and there's little filler pipes in the yard somewhere, and front or back, wherever they came in. And that was the indicator, was that with a filler pipe. Well, when they got the pipelines in there and they were hooked to the municipal, they just abandoned these oil tanks, and if they did it right, they would have probably went in there and removed it, or at least, at the very least, filled it with sand, and the sand would absorb any of the oil that's residue oil in there, use up all the oil and then the residue. But some of them didn't do that, and what happened is that over the years, these oil tanks degrade and opened up, and then the oil seeped out very slowly over time. And if they were on a grade of any kind, it would go downhill, and the oil would go into the neighbor's place and whatever, and it would cause a hell of a mess. And then if you had to remediate it, you're not talking to. I think the removal of an oil tank was, just pretty simple. You get a backhoe in there and pull it out. It probably costs you 10 grand, maybe 20 grand these days. I don't know what it is, but not more than a day. The guys that go in there, rip it out. But the problem is that you have to get the soil checked around it, and there's another $1,000 there for that, to check that out. And then if there's a problem, they find the seepage going out the other way, then you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it can be a very big problem. So you want to have, if you're suspect of this, you may want to have that oil tank clause in there. And that one just says that if there's any remediation to be done, it's to be done by the seller if you find one. In order to remedy that, you can still do an ultrasound prior to. So an ultrasound costs, have you had one done lately, Rhiannon, on an ultrasound on those?
Not in a long time, right? So not for a full ultrasound. It depends on the age, really, right? So if it's in between sort of where the cutoff was, and depending on the area, right? Because if you're on bedrock, you're less likely to be able to put one in. Yeah, but not an ultrasound in a long time. The poke test, lots of that.
The boat test, never heard of that one, but anyway.
Well, where they go through and it's the big rod that they use, right?
Sounds like something I'd do.
Yes,
Save some
exactly.
money. The last ultrasound I had was in New Westminster. And there was a property probably built at the turn of the century, and it was a couple of lots and so on and so forth. And we had that checked. I think the ultrasound, what they do is they take a little machine, kind of like a lawnmower, and they go over all the backyard and stuff, and it shoots down a little bit sound thing, and if it returns an image back, there's something down there. And that at the time was about $500, but again, everything's gone up so much. It's probably $1,000, so you want to be careful about that too. If you're looking at a house, so that's the oil tank clause, but make sure you have that in there for older houses, that kind of thing. Going forward on that. The other one I see a lot of, and I kind of don't understand you realtors. For me, I like things as easy as possible. And I like things done automatically. So what I do is I create my own clauses. And the one in particular is my deposit clause. And my deposit clause, anytime I come across writing a contract, I just put my clause in there, boom, it pops up. And my clause says the deposit to be paid within 1 business day of final site removal by a way of EFT, wire transfer, or bank draft. So it covers all the parameters. And it gives me that extra time because it's 1 business day. So if we're coming up a long weekend and you remove subjects on a Friday, you got till the Tuesday to kind of do it. So I have a custom clause on that going forward. And that's the one I use for my deposit. So that's a real easy one. Anytime you're writing a contract, you're always going to have the deposit there. So you might as well put the clause in there. You don't have to type nothing. You know, a lot of realtors will put within 24 hours, they'll forget because they're busy. But they've removed their subjects on a Friday. Now their client has to have the deposit in on Saturday. They're with Van City or some union or bank and they can't get in there to get the deposit. So you have to do an addendum to extend it to Monday or Tuesday. It's a long way. It's just a pain in the arse. So get that custom clause in there, put it in there, and then it can go wire transfer, whatever your client wants, a bank draft, a wire transfer, an EFT. And then you don't have to worry about changing anything on the contract. So that's just a simple, easy one. What I want to talk about just now is I'm going to go into custom clauses. And this is kind of the part I hate as a managing broker because I end up being kind of somewhat liable for everything you guys do. Your licenses all hang under mine. You get in trouble, I'm in trouble. So it's kind of a tough part for me as a managing broker. So what I'll always tell you, if you are doing a custom clause and they're out there, they're going to do some rentals, they're going to do something on the thing, they're agreed to do this, they're going to put a fence in or whatever it is they're going to do, and then the rentals, are they going to be up to snuff or they're going to be like kind of quality? And about the only advice I can give you is when you're writing the clause, make it very, very specific. And the way I my litmus test there is 2 things. One is if a third party read this clause, would they understand what you're trying to say? And that's very important because think of that third party as a judge. And that's the way I think about it. So if a judge read it and it went to court, would they understand what you're trying to say? So specific dates and, quality of the rentals or as specific as you can get is very important. And that's going to help 99.9% of the time, guys. It'll never go to court. But the clearer the clause is, and that the seller and the buyer understand it, fairly clearly, there's not going to be any, misunderstandings going forward. And most problems with buying and selling are misunderstandings. The buyer thinking one thing and the seller thinking that, as in the cleaning. To what level is the cleaning going to be done? The buyer has one expectation, the seller says, well, we clean it, we vacuum the place, we're out of here. Kind of thing. So, but it gets a little more sophisticated than that. So that's all I can say. If you do have a custom clause, things, talk to me about it. I'll ask you to talk to a lawyer, of course. That's my job to tell you that. If you can get it, if it's any custom clause, anytime that it could affect the integrity of the contract, I get very nervous about it because of the unintended consequences of writing a custom clause. So I'll recommend, Ken Pastor or somebody like that. But ultimately, we're going to have to write our own once in a while, and run it by me. We'll put our heads together and do the best we can. And like I say, my thing is, make sure it's clear and concise, and that any third party can understand it. So, is there any questions about that so far? Is there any clauses you guys want to talk about that I haven't kind of hit on yet? All right. Well, if there is, you can call me with whatever. I just wanted to kind of have a general kind of thing there, where to find these things, what to do, who to talk to, what happens with those things. We got Paul here, so we might as well, use him a little bit. Paul, what's going on with, I hear all the rates are going down. They're going to go to like 1% and
Yeah,
yeah.
wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. Tell us about what's going on in the mortgage end of things.
Yeah, so we're chugging along. It's still quite busy. There are buyers out there. There's really good deals. So a lot of clients that were waiting to buy something a couple of years ago can get into the market now with sort of where condo prices have gone. It's way more affordable than it was at one point. So that's very positive. Rates, probably no move tomorrow. There's an announcement for the Bank of Canada. Inflation's been sticky. Tariff news, it's going to, until there's a deal made, and the uncertainties there, I think the Bank of Canada is going to kind of hold pat. There has been some inflation, but it should start going the other way when the tariff fiasco / distraction is over. Keep in mind, most of our stuff doesn't apply to these tariffs. We have a Canada-Mexico trade agreement, and that stuff's not touched, but just the news and the uncertainty of what other stuff might have tariffs as of August 1st, because there's no deal made yet. That uncertainty is just putting things on hold. So next one up is September. There are a few banks now that are, well, there's a couple of banks that are saying still a half a point coming off prime until the Bank of Canada stops the easing. RBC's come out to say that's it. There's no more drops coming. So kind of take your pick on where we land there. But I do think there's going to be a couple more drops here in the next year, hopefully 6 months.
What about this stress test? Are they going to adjust that out or what?
Probably not. There's a lot on their plate right now. I mean, our industry is advocating for a lot of change, but I think the people in Ottawa right now have enough going on that they're not really too worried about making it easier for clients to purchase properties. So that remains to be seen. Fixed rates are still flat. The bond market's just kind of going up and down a little bit based on where they predict.
What's the best fixed rate you got now for about a 5?
We're still at about 4.19 for 5-year fixed, perhaps better. There are some lenders that's insured, CMHC or Genworth insured. There are some lenders that'll come out with rate specials, so we may see low 4s, and conventional rates that aren't insured are best case scenario. I believe we still have 4.29, 4.39. So still pretty good.
Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah, under 5, that's always good. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. It's not as bad a market. Purchases are a little slower, but there are buyers out there, and I think by September, when the summer's done, we're going to see a bit of a push to the end of the year, if I'm being honest.
Paul,
I think,
are you seeing more applications being done or processed, or what's going on that side?
Yeah, there's quite a few applications. There's a lot of curious people. Whether they pull the trigger or not, I'm seeing a lot of applications. People then kind of say, okay, now I know what I can get. And some are acting quickly, depending on, this comes down to how good the realtor is. Sometimes a realtor will put a client, get the application filled out and perhaps not find the right property. And I've got some realtors that are fantastic at finding the right property for the client and showing them a lot of stuff. And when those deals come up and the client sees what they can buy, they tend to act a lot quicker. But yeah, there's a lot of curious people out there right now that want to get in.
Good. Pent up demand.
Yeah, it's coming. I mean, man, oh man, I remember 2 years ago, we were saying people can't afford to live in Vancouver. They can't afford to buy a condo where they work. It was a big problem, and that problem's kind of gone away now when you can see 2-bedroom apartments that are quite affordable.
Yeah, good. Well, okay, that's does anybody have anything else? Anybody want to talk about their properties or anything that they have listed or coming up or anything like that?
I got a laundry list of things to talk about.
All right, let's go.
First and foremost, though, I am hosting a charity clothing swap in support of Easter Seals through my BNI chapter. I'm looking for a space to hold it. Ideally, it would be somewhere where we can just come in, drop off the stuff on the Friday and set up for Saturday. And that would be for the 15th and 16th of August.
What about the office?
I would love for it to be in Burnaby, just so that we can capture a bigger crowd, but it may end up having to be.
I can't speak for the office, by the way. It's like,
I would just do it and Michael wouldn't even know. It wouldn't matter.
I come in here on Saturdays, nobody here, yeah.
Like no big deal, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, ideally in Burnaby would be the location. So someone that has a warehouse maybe that's vacant right now between tenants. Easter Seals is able to do it so that there's a tax receipt for donation in kind for the space. So that's even better. And if there's a realtor out there that finds me the space, we're happy to do a promotion for them on social media through Easter Seals channels as well. So you get a little bit of Google juice there. So that's one thing. I've got a property that's still available, 404-225 Newport Drive, and that's the 2-bed, 2-bath in Port Moody, and fully renovated, absolutely incredible. That one, we're still getting a lot of people walk through that property, just no offers yet. So I'd love to see one if anybody's interested in something there. That's listed at 868. Then we've got accepted offers on my Dory Street one, accepted offer on Quayside, Quayside that we just did in New West, but price improvements coming for 2 of my properties. One that is 1850 Comox Street, so it's a leasehold downtown. So if you've got any friends who are coming for gay pride and they want to live the queer as folk lifestyle, I've got a property for them. It would be amazing. 1 bed, 1 bath, and listed for $299,900. So great pricing. And then we've also got one in Delta that we're just doing a price reduction on. So that's the sub penthouse at 11881 88th Ave in Delta. So that's in North Delta, and that'll be coming down to $550. So a really good price for views that span from Mount Baker all the way to Vancouver Island, which is great. Then I'm also in search of a 2-bed, 2-bath in Lolo, North Van, up to 850. It needs to have dogs need to be allowed. They have a border collie, so that is an absolute must to be able to have that. And then looking for properties in Delta that are townhomes with lock-off suites, if anybody has something along those lines, or something where an intergenerational sort of family can live. I'd be interested in seeing any of those. And 1 bed, 1 bath in the West End with in-suite laundry and allows puppies. That's what I got this week.
How about Robbie, Amir, and Gavin? You want to promote your listings? Hello,
Sorry
sorry to wake you up.
No, I'm at a place where I can really speak up loud, so sorry.
Okay, we can talk like this.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I got one in Burnaby around the South Slope area. So it's a 2-bed plus a den. It's a townhome and it's 1361 square foot. It's well loved. And the original owner, like, been there for almost 20 years. So they did touch up and then upgrade here and there, but like definitely it's a good blank canvas for your idea. Make it uniquely your clients.
Good. Robbie, you got anything going on?
No, I sold my listing, so I'm in between right now.
Oh, okay. Well, good. Congratulations.
I can
Yeah.
talk now.
Okay, go ahead.
I have 2 listings out in North Vancouver and Roche Point. They're like First Nations lands, brand new properties. It's a 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom. That's listed at $799, and then a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom listed at $849. They're brand new.
So
Yeah.
where is that again?
And Roche Point in North Vancouver. It's
So those are leaseholds?
yeah, First
No, no
Nations.
GST, or what's the deal on that?
No, there's GST there.
Oh,
Yeah,
they're
just brand
got
new.
their finger and everything, eh?
Yeah, just brand new.
Is that Indian lands or not?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It's a Tsleil-Waututh Nation land, yes. And then I have one listing downtown. It's a condo at 1500 Alberni Street. 3-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom, listed at 2.250. I mean, the building, I know last year got a fire, but it's on the other side, but everything's kind of been taken care of. Insurances are paying it. Just pretty well, quite a well-run building. And my clients bought into it 2 years ago. They're just looking for a change. So yeah,
Good.
if you have any buyers for that, and if you're looking to do open houses too, please let me know.
There you go, open house, there we go, yeah. all
Are
right,
they
got it.
allowing open houses in that building nowadays?
It's a tough one. They are. It's just like you have to kind of have two people there to do the open. So one outside, one up, one by the door, one outside. And I'm trying to actually talk to. There's a fair bit of listings in the building, so I'm talking to the other realtors to kind of combine and do an open together. So that's hopefully working out soon. Yeah. I had Atlas help me do the realtor open there, so that was really cool. Yeah, and then that, and then I'm looking for looking for somebody west in the West End, but not a leasehold property. Sorry, Rihanna. So
Damn
I'm
it.
looking, yeah, I know, looking for 1 bedroom in the West End for a client of mine. Hopefully somewhere on the quieter side of the street. Is a bit of a shyer person, does not want the building to overlook another building right away. So yeah, so 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom condo, hopefully. In-suite laundry, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
so it's a
guys,
tough one.
just with regards to cooperation, you know, if you got these listings, don't feel bad about reaching out to the other realtors in the area that have similar properties and
Mhm.
sharing information and so on and so forth. That's the way things are done. And pick up the phone, give them a call, and who knows, you know, if you can have a combined open house in that area or something like that, it's totally adequate, and you're just doing your job. So
I
you do
actually
that.
contacted the realtor who helped me, who was on the seller side when I helped my clients buy this 1500 Alberni. So he's been been very resourceful and helpful with the building and trying to get me set up with other realtors as well. So it's been really good collaboration there too.
Yeah, we've done it before where where we've gone and collected an entire group of agents who have listings in the same price band, and then we've done like a big promotional push for all the agents to come and see with their clients, see the units, and there's, you know, a prize at the end of everything if you collect all of the signatures from all of the actual listings by going to them. That's very, very helpful
Oh,
sometimes.
that's cool, yeah. What happened, Rihanna? What happened that one you put on there, free maintenance fees for a year?
Yeah, we've had a ridiculous amount of people inquire, but a lot of people just aren't in the position to be able to do a leasehold, is really what it comes down to,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well,
So,
I mean, it's just,
yeah.
you know, you're gonna have to sell these properties, guys. They're not gonna sell themselves anymore, and you're gonna have to be, you know, you're gonna take it the next step, next level on whatever you do in your marketing, working with other realtors. So,
Yeah, and
like I said,
and just a quick note on that, like, because originally we had it so that the commission was an increased commission on it, except for the fact that if we all remember, that is something that is for the agent, right? But if you do something that's geared towards the buyer, it's a little bit different. So that's why the marketing was that way when we were doing it.
yeah, just with regards to that, guys, we're a full service, full pay real estate company. Century 21 office policy is that we pay full buyers, cooperating brokerages commissions. And that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.225 in the first 100 and 1.1625 in the balance. So please, especially these days, keep it up above that or at that. Anytime you start discounting that down, you're not doing yourself or your seller any favors. I would go higher than lower on that, especially these days. And I know everybody's trying to cut corners and make a few more bucks or whatever, but now's not the time to do that. Don't discount that. Cooperating brokerages commissions is really important, and we want to be seen as a full 100% real estate office as well. When you see Century 21, you're looking at quality. You're going to get paid full pop. You know, great realtors here. All right, that's it for today, guys. Any other questions anybody want to put forth? Okay, all right, guys, have a good one. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.